How's it going, guys? My name is Stone, and welcome to these reviews, or welcome back if it ain't your first time here. Today, I'm going to be talking about a very special album. Special in my eyes, maybe special in your eyes. Moondog's second self-titled album, Moondog, released in 1969. Sorry for the sleeve glare. It's just one of those albums that kind of opened that way. So if you don't have the sleeve on, the cover be fallen, which would be very unfortunate. But yeah, this album, as I said, released in 1969. Haha. If you don't know who Moondog is, let me enlighten you a little. It's not too far-fetched to not know who this guy is. He is a very niche yet unique figure in the world of music. Moondog, aka Lewis Harding, was most notably known for his street performances in New York on 6th Avenue, where he would read and write poetry, play on his original instrument called a trimba, and write out melodies he'd hear in his head onto sheet music. I didn't write it in my notes, but I should mention that he is blind. He got a dynamite cap hit his face when he was like 12 or so, so maybe that adds a little more perspective on where this guy's coming from and how he writes music, you know. But he would also do all this on 6th Avenue while being dressed up as a Viking, so he was most known as the Viking of 6th Avenue. In June of 1969, though, after releasing a few albums in the 50s, Lewis had been given the chance to record an album with over 50 session musicians under the Columbia label, which, of course, that would result in this masterpiece, in my opinion. This album contributed significantly to his reputation as a composer, and not merely as the poet Viking in New York City. Moondog's ability to bridge his earlier jazz conventions with classical musicianship make for a music experience that is simply idiosyncratic, or other words, honestly, nothing else quite like it, really. With some critics considering this blend of the two genres to be called third stream, which I have no real knowledge or musical experience in, but if this is a good gateway, if this is my gateway for it, so be it, because this is really good. And I mean, with all these genre names, it gets so confusing at times. It's like, is this third stream? Is it minimal? Is it Moondog? I don't know. But before I get into the track listing and why I love every one of these songs, I'll just explain real quick how I heard of Moondog, because I've been using a lot of Rate Your Music lately to find new albums or artists, where to start when it comes to listening to new artists, and just seeing people's opinions on records I like. And I was reading up on the Shags. Check out my Shags review if you're a fan, but I forgot who was reviewing it, but someone gave like a negative review, but they opened it with saying how they thought they'd like the Shags because they were big fans of Beefheart, Jandik, and The Residents. 3 artists that I really do admire, especially Beefheart. And after they mentioned those 3, they admitted how Moondog is probably their favorite artist of all time. So imagine that. You hear 3 artists you like, they're very weird, I'd say. They're all different in their own way. And then someone brings up this 4th guy called Moondog. Oh, my hairs went tingling fast, thinking of, oh my god, there's another weird musician out there with a maybe kind of weird name like Moondog. I assume once I found the cover or what he looked like, I was like, oh, this guy's like some crazy Howlin' Wolf Beefheart mashup, you know? And again, I went through Rate Your Music. I found this album to be his highest rated, so I went to check it out. And I was very perplexed when I first heard it, because I was just like, where do you get that comparison? How do you compare this to Jandik or The Residents or Beefheart? So that kind of threw me off, but at the same time, it still kept my interest listening through the album, with how it's very much, to me who doesn't listen to classical music that much, it sounds very much like Disney music at first. But there is still a lot of great musicianship on here that's pretty complex and polyrhythmic, which I'll get into with the tracks, but there's also just a grouping melody in a lot of these songs that keep it going and that make me want to, I don't know, give it a further listen. Especially after multiple listens, I just love this album, and it's like super good. Super duper good. But let's just get into the track listing. Before that, I might drink some water because I'm dying out here, but we open the album with the theme, titled theme, And what I love about this and the rest of the tracks on the album that feature is the use of the trimba. I think the trimba does a great job at keeping a solid beat for all of the horns, flutes, and strings to play alongside of, even if it's in a snappy 5/4 time signature, which from what I've read, Moondog was very against 4/4 time signatures, even though I think some appear on here, but you gotta appease to the easy listeners. According to the vinyl, a new instrument is brought in every 16 minutes, which in my opinion gives the track a very massive yet uplifting atmosphere that builds up perfectly over the course of its runtime. It then suddenly concludes with the sounds of New York, or what I assume is New York, before Moondog shares a couplet of knowledge before, I guess as a way to bridge the theme to the second track. Overall, theme is a great introduction to the album. It gives you a basic understanding of how the other tracks will follow without spoiling too much of the fun that's soon to come. That second track I mentioned is probably one of my favorite tracks on the entire album. Definitely top 3. You'll see at the end, but it's a Stampin' Ground. This features my favorite use of the percussion with that snare just stomping away on such a great riff. That riff being like, obviously the musicians do it better, but you know what I mean. It's catchy, it's enthralling, and again, the reeds and the horns build themselves up and around it with such rich and melodic phrases that really inspired me to do a rendition of this track someday, because I absolutely love the use of every arrangement on this track. It really gives off the vibe of knights going into battle, or at least a soundtrack to a movie of like Crusaders or some forms of medieval battle conquest. And that isn't to say that this track is like a novelty in any way, because I honestly love listening to this track so much. Probably the track I listen to the most on here, just because it's like only 2 minutes, but it gets a good groove going the whole time, and it's a good song to drive to, or just when you want to feel inspired to go into battle or not. Following that is the beautiful track Symphonique Number 3, Ode to Venus. This features no percussion but leaves plenty of room for the strings and woodwinds to create such a lush and passionate texture of music, which creates a perfect sunset vibe, which if you're familiar with my channel, you know I love sunset vibes. They're a way to illustrate the beauty of a song in terms of the situation you could listen to it in and benefit from. Definitely the track that tugs at my heartstrings the most. Even when it begins to sound a bit incoherent, the instruments still elaborate on its theme beautifully and adds to the track's ability to be polyrhythmic yet keep that gripping melody that is just so beautiful. Honestly, it's just one of those songs that could definitely get you teary-eyed, It's, for a delicate mood, very delicate mood. We go to the fourth track, the closer on side 1, being Symphonique Number 6, Good for Goody, dedicated to Benny Goodman, also known as the King of Swing. The best example, I find this track to be the best example of Moondog's jazzy, avant-garde approach to classical music, which honestly kind of makes it a highlight. I don't think it's in my top 4, but like I said, all these songs are pretty perfect, so it's like they have their own unique abilities to them. This song creates a beautiful ground of music, in which every new instrument is introduced every 8 bars, creating this magnificent wall of sound that just builds and builds until its conclusion just comes crashing down on you. And as much as I love this song, I only wish that it could be a little longer, since it gradually builds up to something, in my opinion, worth more than that sudden conclusion. Though I do think it makes a good closer for side 1. It's definitely a track I enjoy showing people who aren't familiar with Moondog, as I really think it shows off his, his ability to blend the two genres of a classical approach, a avant-garde jazzy approach to classical music. And I think it's just a fine piece of work in my opinion. And I feel like it's a great way to intrigue the listener to flip the vinyl over, to check out side 2, which, to sum up side 1, I think the opening 3 tracks play off one another beautifully and make for a very engaging experience. When you consider how varied the music is, and that point especially when you get to Good for Goody as the closer. Now, side 2 opens with what might be honestly my favorite track on the entire album, most definitely actually. Miniism number 1. Sorry if I'm butchering some of these words, I didn't really make time to look them up, but it's separated into 3 movements, 4 if you consider the opening couplet served by Moondog. The 3 main movements being Allegro, Andante Adagio, and Vivace, or Vivace. The first movement does a great job at providing an excellent groove that's able to support the horn, strings, and bassoons, bassoons. And I don't know, it's a great way to get you back into the album. The second movement, however, might be my favorite moment from this entire record. This conduction by Moondog is simply serene, capturing a wondrous yet dreamy musical landscape that almost, as I said with Symphony Number 3, gets me teary-eyed, and I'll definitely leave a timestamp on the song, the moment in the song that I just find to be so gorgeous, and it's like easily, in my opinion, the best moment on the entire record. And honestly, just that conduction, that second movement is just perfect in my eyes. The last movement does a great job at bringing up the tempo and elaborating on the first movement a bit before reaching a satisfying conclusion. And maybe you could argue the song is a little too long for its welcoming. I feel like sometimes I've listened to it where I'm just kind of like, once I get past the second movement, I'm kind of just whatever about it. But honestly, it's just a beautiful track. If each movement taking the listener through its own emotional roller coaster, which portrays the track to be nothing less than a piece of musical cinema and storytelling. So, way to go, Moondog. Great shit. But following that is one of Moondog's most known tracks, Laments 1, aka Bird's Lament. This is dedicated to Charlie Parker, a jazz musician that Moondog knew pretty well, famous jazz musician, and almost recorded an album with him before his passing. Definitely the most accessible piece on the album, featuring a lovely combination of the alto and baritone sax, which I really enjoy. It honestly makes me wish that the sax playing on here was more used on this record, because it's just nothing short of stellar in my opinion. Like Good for Goody, it's a bit too short for it to be a real satisfying listen, but the track overall is still awe-inspiring, especially when you notice how the strings really pick up towards the end and how the saxophones continue to bounce off each other, which in my opinion, I feel like after multiple listens, I didn't really notice how the strings kind of built up like that, which, it's very anthemic, very theatrical sounding, which I really enjoy. You could really argue that a lot of this music is theatrical, whether it be for a movie or for the thoughts Moondog had in his mind, the way he transcribed these two, I guess, to build stories and musical stories, I say. Now I don't want to sound like some high dude, because I'm not high at the moment, but you get what I'm saying. The next track, Witch of Endor, which is separated into 3 movements, the dance, trio, and the dance reprise. The second movement, trio, depicts a musical illustration of a witch prophecy coming true according to the liner notes of this album. It's easy to compare the similarities to this track's progressions with the other 6-minute track, Miniism number 1, but I do find the musical storytelling on here to be much more direct, with each trio segment being very theatrical in the way the arrangements are set up. The dance movements are also very enjoyable, thanks in part to the use of the trimba, which provides a sense of drive for the rest of the instruments to glide over, which, I'm always a fan. And I think what I like about this track especially is the use of a fade out rather than a sudden conclusion like other tracks, because I feel like it leaves you wanting more and it makes you wonder where the track's music was heading towards. And then following that, we get to the closer of the album, pretty awesome song in my opinion, Symphony Number 1, Portrait of a Monarch. The arrangements on this track are meant to depict the life of a monarch, displaying his ego and humor through quick bursts of music that really make this track sound unpredictable and I don't know, quite jumpy, which I really admire. It's got like I want to say I guess it's got like a lot of motion to it, but not in the way that the other tracks do that are more somber or more lush. This more just feels like, yeah, kind of like a person just kind of bursting energy out, even though they're trying to contain it. This was Moondog's one of Moondog's favorite tracks, and I could see why, as it gives the album a wonderful send-off and does a great job at being both sporadic, yet calm and soothing at times. But for the most part, I feel like it's pretty unpredictable, which makes it a pretty gripping listen. And when you compare it to everything else on the album, it does, I think, provide, like I said, the proper send-off for this record because it's a little different. You know, it stands out a little compared to the rest of the tracks. But yeah, it's kind of playing at the moment. Enjoy it, but yeah. My favorite side on the entire album, most definitely side one. I just think because the first three songs, as I said, play off each other very well. And side two is still honestly pretty amazing. Like, I love listening to side two just because it's like 6 minute song, 2 minute song, 6 minute song, 2 minute song. Nice little balance there. And the thing with side one too that I kind of am like, I mean, I don't care. I love this album, but it's like only 13 minutes long. So, you know, I feel like you could argue side two is better, but I just think side one has the better progression. But my top four songs, I know, top four, is going to be in no particular order, but Miniism number one is my favorite. Following that is Stamping Ground, Symphony number three, and Bird's Lament. So these three, they're not in any order, but I know my favorite song on the album. And yeah, now that this vinyl is done, I'll show it off to you. This is a record store day version I have. Yeah, I'll show you the actual cover and stuff before I take that out. I love this photo of Moondog. It just looks so badass, you know. I remember learning on YouTube how when he went to Germany for the first time, he was very disappointed to see that people or Vikings didn't actually have horns, which maybe he knew that at the time of this photo because he's not wearing any, but I like how it opens up like this. It makes me want to get another copy of this album just for just to hang it up, you know. And then what I love about this, just got the beautiful photos of him. Just him like mad chilling, orchestrating people, looking blind, unfortunately. And then it's got all the like beautiful liner notes, like gives you this whole story. Talks about each song, which I use as a reference for, you know, this review. Kind of talks about instrument depiction or descriptions, like can't pronounce it, but like Hus. Gives you the personnel, and apparently you play bass on it. It's kind of cool. But the best thing is, though, as I mentioned, this is a record store day release, and I was fortunate to get this on Discogs for cheap on white vinyl. Ooh, so nice. And it sounds amazing too. I feel like when I use Discogs nowadays, I try to make sure I can find comments that, you know, people could judge, or people can leave their reviews as to whether or not it's a good purchase. So yeah, there you go, guys. There was my review. Wow, Moondog, right? Please check it out if you haven't heard it. But if not, recommend me something cool. Recommend some weird music like Jandek or Residence to me. I'll give it a listen, you know. But until then, see you guys in the next review. Ta-ta, bye.